Coach Dickson, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you jumping on here. For the listeners at home, will you tell us a little bit about your background, your motivation, and kind of where you are currently?
Yeah, my name is Ron Dickson. I'm the Director of Strength and Conditioning for Olympic Sports at Virginia Tech. I'm originally from Hiram, Georgia, which is about 30 miles northwest of Atlanta. Most people don't know where Hiram is. I went to undergrad and played collegiate football at the University of West Georgia. I attended grad school at Georgia State. During my graduate studies, I was a graduate assistant strength and conditioning coach at Emory University.
Okay.
After I finished that up, I spent a year at Merrimack College, just north of Boston. Came back down to South Carolina, where I spent a year at Wofford. And then I ended up in University of Tennessee in Chattanooga for 5 years prior to being at Virginia Tech. And I've been at Virginia Tech about a year and a half now.
Okay. So how have your past positions kind of set you up for success in the position you're in now?
Early in my career, I worked at some schools that had smaller strength staffs. And due to this, I was given more responsibility. So if you have two strength coaches, one full-time and one basically paid intern or assistant, and you have 25 teams, they're going to be divvied up a little bit differently versus if you have, many more full-times. I had 4 teams at Emory right off the bat. 12 teams at Merrimack. At one point, I had 16 teams at Wofford.
Yikes, okay.
I think just having the opportunity to design and implement programs, coach and really just make mistakes at an early age or early coaching age, I think really helped me out in the long run. It also allowed me to work with different sport coaches, support staff members. I also had the chance to work with some really good strength coaches along the way, and I've had some really good mentors as well. So, to sum it up, I think having the mentors I've had, being around the people I've been around, and then just having the experiences early on helped me learn early on.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Will you kind of explain the structure of your department now and what that looks like?
Yeah, so right now we have 4 full-times. We have 2 graduate assistants. I am the director. There is a senior director, Brian Neal. Brandon Dillard is the associate director, and then Kelly Murphy is the assistant director. We all have our individual teams, and we all have, individual, I guess you'd say, administrative duties along with that. The 2 GAs we have, they work with all teams, and then we have them work on programming with some of the freshman developmental programs. They work with cheer and dance. With our GA program, we're all about, you earn your opportunities, right? So we come in and we have these blanket things that we want you to do as a graduate assistant, but as you show us what you're capable of doing, and as you learn and grow and progress, we're going to give you more responsibility. We've had some GAs that have earned the right to have their own teams and do certain things. So it's kind of merit-based, and, we tell all our interns, GAs, everyone coming in, you're in charge of your own destiny, in a sense, right? So, we're going to do our best to mentor you, coach you, but, your attitude, your effort, all these things that you put into it are ultimately going to, you're ultimately in charge of your own destiny.
I love that. Okay. So moving into that in your department and how you guys do things, what kind of technology do you guys have / utilize over there?
We have heart rate GPS monitoring systems. We have heart rate only monitoring systems, tendos, vertical jump mats, laser timing systems. So we have some things that we can collect objective data in a weight room as well as on the field or on the court.
Okay. No, that's awesome. And then do those pieces get utilized with all teams, or are they specific sports, or how does that look?
Our department doesn't pay for them, we'll put it that way. Now, our department pays for the tendo units in the weight room. Our department pays for the vertical jump mats and some of the things in the weight room. If it's a GPS heart rate system, our individual sports pay for those. So depending on the sport, or, we have some collaboration with some academic departments as well.
So generally speaking, what does your initial assessment look like for some of your teams specifically?
Well, I like to start communicating with our incoming student athletes as soon as the NCAA will allow us. So, we'll start looking at training history, injury history. From there, when we get them on campus, I'll assess static posture and various movements. Looking for stability, mobility within different segments of the body. This could be circumstantial to the individual sport as well. If it's baseball, it may be more upper extremity as well as general lower body. If it's soccer, lacrosse, or something like that, it may be a little more intensive in the lower region of the body.
Yeah.
From there, after collecting the data, I kind of look at trends, or
Uh-huh.
we look at trends and we look at outliers.
Mm-hmm.
If 90% of our freshmen lack ankle mobility,
Mm-hmm.
We'll spend a lot of time on it. If 10% have tight lats, I identify that group and I'll speak with them, and we'll do some group stuff, but it won't necessarily be something that we address corporately with the volume or the spend as much time on it as things that everyone needs per se.
Yeah.
When we have freshmen come in, we'll also conduct certain tests that measure sport-specific athletic qualities if we deem them safe. Vertical jump, 30-yard sprint. I don't usually max test athletes in the weight room when they arrive on campus.
Yeah.
I may spend 4 to 6 weeks working into a rep max. If they're proficient in the movements, then everything else checks out.
Yeah. No, I think that's a big one, right? Because I think a lot of younger coaches think that max testing has to be done like first day, right? So with these new athletes, we got to get numbers, blah blah blah, and they kind of rush into things, right? So I think that's a good distinction that you've kind of had made there.
Well, also, I think it depends on the population as well. So, if you have, and I'm not saying you should do this with a football player, you should do this with someone, but if you have an athlete with a higher training age, and coming in that an athlete, their strength program in high school and it was top notch, and you speak with their strength coach, you may test them out a little bit faster than you would someone who you don't have as much information on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just like many things in strength and conditioning, the answer is always it depends, right? So.
Yep.
I love it. Okay. So diving back, switching gears a little bit back to some of the technology piece, right? What kind of questions do you need or want answered from some of those monitoring tools that you use? Let's say with lacrosse or soccer, since those are two of your primary sports.
So I take more of a reverse engineering approach.
Okay.
The first thing I want to do is I want to identify the physiological demands of a competition for that particular sport, whether it be lacrosse, soccer, tennis, whatever it is. From there, I want to see what stress is necessary by the sport coach to prepare the athletes for competition.
Okay.
Technically, tactically, mentally. I want to look at the things that I can't control or the things that are going to happen physiologically.
Yeah.
Once I've identified those, and it requires data collected over a year or more. So, I have a year's and a half worth of data now on, or closer to 2 years on lacrosse and soccer, so I have a better idea of what the stresses throughout the year look like, right?
And
this will somewhat be individualized based on individual coach as well. So how they conduct practice, their style of play, what they deem as important. I know there's a debate that goes around a lot with strength and conditioning coaches on mental toughness and how, or mental resilience, and how we're going to create these certain things through physical factors. Well, there are certain coaches that, if our coach is going to run practice a certain way because that's what he feels he needs to be successful, I'm not going to necessarily come in and tell him that he's wrong because the physiological stresses don't match up. I'm going to, probably take a seat back, assess, wait, and, maybe he knows something I don't.
Yeah.
So, just because it's not physiologically sound doesn't mean it's not effective, especially with an 18 to 22-year-old and an 18 to 22-year-old's mind. Sometimes the mental is more important, right?
Yeah.
But once I've identified these variables, that I have a little over control over, I can create a plan.
Yeah.
Anyone who's been a strength and conditioning coach for 15 minutes knows that training blocks rarely go as planned.
Yeah.
So that's where the ongoing monitoring and adjusting comes into play.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I want our tech to help me identify what our athletes need. Assess and monitor our athletes during training, and help me make better educated guesses ultimately when we need to adjust training or how we need to do so.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. And so what are some of the limitations with some of that technology that you have?
To be honest, me as the operator right now, I'm fairly new to some of the technology we have here.
Okay.
I've been at smaller schools, but I'd say less resources. So I'm still trying to figure out how to best use the technologies that we do have in order to collect data to help out our teams. I don't. You try to wear these many hats, and the more information you collect, the better. I definitely don't think it's a bad thing, but I also want to make sure it's relevant. I want to make sure that I know how to work the systems, and I know what I need to get out of them to maximize what we're doing, and best use of my time as well. I'm a strength and conditioning first and foremost. That I want to use this information to help me make better educated guesses. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Okay. And so moving forward with that, right, into some load management, let's talk about specifically, again, field sports, right? What does your management look like in terms of total distances, and how does that kind of stack up in different sport?
Well, I'll use soccer as an example.
Okay.
In the off season, we'll progressively overload internal, external loads leading up into preseason. After 2 years, I have a better idea of the demands of preseason. So having this data has also helped me educate the guys on why we're doing what we're doing and why I'm asking them to do certain things. Showing them game distances and heart rates. It really helps me out to objectify things when I'm asking them to do really aggressive stuff for extended periods of time. And they're like, that sometimes that isn't always validated subjectively. So it's good to say, hey, this is where your heart rate's going to be in a game. This is why you're doing what you do. So most of the time during the season, though, we're going to use the data to make sure our high minute guys are not overtraining, our developmental guys are not undertraining. That being said, there's some weeks, let's say we average 2 games a week and we go 10 days without a game or something crazy like that. We need to make sure that we're maintaining certain qualities with our high minute guys and everyone in general, so we can make sure that we don't detrain certain qualities within a 10-day span of not playing, and we don't come out flat and we're not going to get tired quick after 10 days. You think off the top of your head be super fresh, but there are certain qualities that you can lose pretty quick if you don't maintain them at least. So that's kind of the gist of it, and how we manage the total distances at different times of the year. And it's kind of weird. The more I've looked at the data and what I've collected, you think you get more specialized, or you start looking at these small numbers, but to me it really made me take a step back and look at the bigger picture, to be honest, and looking at, okay, how many miles are these guys running throughout the year, and how can I better prepare them at different times of the year so that we can we can accomplish certain goals. I mean, in the weight room, we may program these different linear and nonlinear periodization squat programs. We may go 4 weeks of increasing the stress followed by a taper week or a reload week or whatever you want to call it, and then back at it again. I'm doing a lot of the same stuff with the miles and the speeds and the sprints and just the energy system development as a whole. In the weight room, a lot of times we work in that first energy system, and when we go over 6, 7, 8 reps and it starts getting past 10, 15 seconds, we don't like it very much. But it really has given me the opportunity to look at it from the big picture and look at my miles just like I look at other things we do in the weight room.
I love that, because that's the part where I think a lot of coaches are weaker, right? Especially coming from a lot of smaller schools where technology is not as accessible. So the tracking on the field is a lot more just kind of touch and go of like, this is some of my templates, this is what I've learned, but it's not as detailed as like volume, load, intensity, that kind of stuff. So even on that note, what are some like ballpark distances that you might use in a session in terms of like meters, or just for reference for some of those coaches that might not have access to some of that tracking technology?
Well, that depends on style of play, your athlete, the position, not just a goalie or a fielder. In soccer, for example. That being said, with my situation, with our style of play, with our opponents, some of our soccer guys can travel 9 to 10 miles, and I like to include the warm up on that. Usually the warm up is a mile to a mile and a half of mixed movements, mixed intensity, so on and so forth. But you're looking at 9 or 10 miles for some of our midfielders or some of our outside backs. With lacrosse, some of our midfielders will travel 6 to 7 miles a game, and I want to kind of preface that, and all miles aren't necessarily created equal. So 8 miles, 8-10 miles for one of my midfielders in a soccer game is going to be a completely different stress versus slowly jogging or walking 8 miles over a 2-hour span in a straight line. So I do look at total distances, but I also look at speeds, various speed zones, accelerations, deceleration zones. I look at total internal load, so how much work are they doing grossly? But I also look at the different heart rate zones. These can vary greatly within a given sport depending on the position, and again, like I was saying, the style of play. This can also vary based off if you're playing your game or your opponent's game. And what I mean by that is if you're a possession type team in soccer and you're controlling the game, it's going to look a lot different versus if they're pressing you, you're not controlling the game. If you're on offense a lot, it might look a lot different than versus if you're on defense a lot. So, and I was, we have heart rate only with women's tennis the other day, or we have it now with women's tennis, and I was looking at these two heart rate graphs of some of our girls who competed over the weekend, and one of our girls, she had an opponent, and her heart rate average was 76% or whatever over the extended over the entire match, and then the second opponent, it was like 82%. And I was talking to her, and the second opponent was the next day, so either A, she was a little bit fatigued from the day before, and she was having to work harder to do the same amount of work she was doing, or B, she had a harder opponent. And we were going back and forth, and I was like, so how was your opponent Saturday? She was like, well, I won, and it wasn't as hard as Sunday.
Yeah.
And I was like, I see that. And I was like, I see that. Like, you had to physically work harder on Sunday.
Yeah.
Your demands were different. So, again, when you start looking at internal external loads, again, I think you can simplify it. One thing I've really found out over the past year and a half and working with this stuff is you learn all this, you gain all this information, but until you start having the opportunity to experience it, just like, at an early age when I started my career, until you start getting those experiences with it, I have light bulb moments almost every day, and then I'll talk to somebody and I'll be like, oh my God, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to just, again, take a step back, see the big picture, and it's crazy because I've spent most of my early career in the weight room of power sports, and now I spend more time outside of the weight room.
Yeah.
And I feel like personally I've had the opportunity to really grow with what I do over the past year and a half to 2 years because I'm just having different experiences. I've been uncomfortable. I've been outside my comfort zone a lot, and it's been great. So I've really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. And I think it's another awesome thing is that you're using the data to help you objectively, but also combining that with the anecdotal and the stuff you see, right? So for example, with that tennis example, you could look at the numbers, but you're only getting part of the story unless you're part of the experience, or you talk to the athlete, or somebody that was there. Because a lot of times I think people can get lost in the numbers and just looking at the data, and that can get very dangerous.
Well, yeah, I know a lot of people who have done things physiologically more correct than others, and the others have had more success. And again, I think when you start working with professional athletes, it changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And as you get older and you're more mature, but there's so much mental variance with younger athletes.
Yeah.
I think that I think you definitely have to look at everything.
Yeah.
And you have to have these conversations. And I talk to coaches a lot about, I want to cross-correlate what I'm seeing with the data with what is going on.
For sure.
And I'm learning a lot more about soccer at this level, but up until this school, I had worked with soccer, but I hadn't been at every practice.
Yeah.
So I'm able to look at the data, cross-reference it with what they think, and then I'm really, it's really helping me put the puzzle together a little better, and then I realized that the puzzle's a lot bigger than I thought of it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. And then you also mentioned some stuff about speed zones and high intensity distances, right? And there's a lot of literature on this, but do you have any different distinctions, or what is high intensity distance or high intensity sprinting for you or for your program?
With Polar Team Pro, they have built-in metrics, so anything over, I believe it's 11.8 meters per second is considered high-speed running or high-speed yardage. Anything over, acceleration over 2.8 meters a second is considered a sprint. Well, it also breaks it down into these different acceleration, speed, and sprint zones.
Okay.
So I've been using those as my metrics. I've moved them up and down a little bit with let's say lacrosse against soccer, but I don't have any specific literature that I hey, I need to keep it at 2.9 meters per second or anything like that. I've really just been using the same scale and comparing everything to that scale. So if I'm jumping on the same scale in my bathroom every morning and it's 1 pound off one way or the other, as long as I'm on the same scale, I'm going to see the change. And I can compare the loads of a day, a week, a month, a year to themselves. And so, as part of identifying the needs of the sport and the individual positions, I need to make sure that those athletes are prepared for that. So if I have a midfielder that is going to average 3,000 yards of high-speed yardage each week during the season, as part of their game demands and their practice demands, I need to make sure that they're prepared going in for 3,000 yards of high-speed yardage every week.
Yeah.
If I'm running them 500 yards in training over the summer, and that first week they run 3,500 yards, well, we could run into some hamstring issues, or we could run into some issues. Same thing with accelerations and change of direction, and the best way to prepare is to play that sport and to have that week it's going to look like. So, my main thing is with all the metrics is I got to see what the first week of preseason is going to look like, and then I've got to make sure they're prepared for that first week of preseason.
Yeah.
And with that, it's if we have a friendly, if it's what are the coaches going to do? How many two-a-days are we going to do? And not only just the total gross amount of work, but unfortunately, coaches don't always agree, or they don't always use the Charlie Francis high-low method.
Yeah.
So most, we'll have 3 or 4 days where we have 2 days in a row, and they'll be every day is a high CNS day. So I'm not necessarily preparing them for what's best practice physiologically. I'm preparing them for what they're going to see.
Yeah.
Our bodies are great adapters.
Yeah.
So if we progressively over time, just like in a weight room, I wouldn't jump 25% on a squat. Well, I shouldn't jump 25% on mileage one week to another. If I'm progressing in 10% increments each week over the summer, as far as total volume, and I'm doing things correctly in that sense. And I have these conversations, and I'll talk to other strength coaches now, and I'll share this information. I'll talk to sport coaches, and I'm quick to say I'm still learning. I'm still a student of this. That being said, if my soccer program only has 5 miles in it on average per week during the summer, and that first week they're going to run 30 miles, it's no different being in the weight room. If I'm going to expect my athlete to squat 405 the first week of preseason, and he's been doing 225 on average every week, we're going to run into a problem.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think it's even easier to grasp when you kind of compare it in those metrics as far as like to the weight room, because again, that's the language a lot of coaches are still speaking that don't have as much experience on the field. So I think that's huge. And then kind of with that, how do you use technology, or have you been able to use it in like return to play protocols, or how does it even help you in a busy game schedule week, right? So say where you have like 2 matches per week and you're trying to structure something in the in-between time. How does that look?
Yeah, so, to answer your first question, we use it a lot for return to play now.
Okay.
I've stolen some different models from different conferences, and so, if we're going to look at, we look at chronic loads over time, we look at acute loads, day-to-day monotony, and if we have an athlete who, let's say he does tweak his ankle or something like that, we're going to go back and look at what kind of fitness or what kind of base he had coming into that. From there, we're going to look at how long he's out or how long he's been immobilized, and then we're going to start progressively working him back into, where he's, able to participate. If I have a soccer player who tweaks his ankle, he's out for 3 days, then he's back, and he's been playing all year, he's in great fitness. It's not going to be as an aggressive a return of play versus let's say I have someone that has to be booted up for a week, and then we're back to walk, jog, run, sprint, change direction. We're going to look at how much he missed, and then we're going to progressively build him back up to those distances it's going to take to, if he's a starter, well, we got to build him back up to where he's prepared to play 2 games a week. And that's, that's not just so that's there's a lot of variables that go into it. Again, there's, it's a very loaded question. But even, let's say that we have someone that was in a boot, and we had a couple guys early in the year that got stepped on that had a broke foot or something that was in a boot. And, okay, we can't run them, but what can we do? Like, I can't get sprints. I can get internal loads, so we bike them. And we tried to match some of those internal loads. Now, knowing when they got back on their feet, it wasn't going to be the same. It's not specific enough, but we can keep them in general shape so that when they do get back, more than likely they're going to be able to come back faster because their general physical preparation is farther along than it would have been if they weren't doing anything. During the in season, it really depends on the games, when the games are, what the previous week looked like, what the next couple weeks will look like. During the week we start to taper about 2 days out from the competition. We like to taper time versus intensity. Obviously, you're not going to be doing a lot of 30-minute bouts of 11v11 in soccer specifically day before a game.
Yeah.
But we're going to start tapering about 2 days out. The day after a game, we're going to split our athletes up into 2 to 3 groups. Usually these groups consist of our high game load athletes, medium game load athletes, maybe someone that plays 30 to 45 minutes,
Yeah.
and then our low to no game athletes.
Mm.
The high output athletes, they'll spend the day lifting and recovering.
Yeah.
The medium load athletes, they'll have a moderate practice. We're trying to supplement what they didn't get maybe the day before.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go recover. And then our developmental group, they're going to go train hard, and then they're going to lift. And we use this data to determine what's needed.
Yeah.
We go into the lifting portion. We usually lift 2 days a week. We try to lift 2 times per week during the season.
Okay.
We'll have some sort of, if we have 4 to 6 days out from the next game,
yeah,
we'll do a total body lift.
Okay.
If we have if it's 2 to 3 days out, we'll do upper body lift, and I'll do some lower body, just mobility work, some body weight work. Under the current college soccer model, most of our athletes live in a catabolic state.
Okay.
So I think that, and I've had this conversation with my GAs the other day, and they're talking about, working, 90 to, I asked them to create some models as part of some of their projects. And,
yeah.
They're talking about sustaining, 80 to 90%, max effort loads on squat in season with a soccer player. And I was like, that's going to be tough to do.
Yeah.
And if other people are doing it and they're listening to this, I want you to let me know how to do it, because I would love to do it.
Yeah.
That being said,
yeah. But no, that's definitely a difficult thing to implement, especially in that population, right? Just with the culture of the sport and everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of clubs out there that don't lift at all. So just if I can create an anabolic response with my guys,
yeah,
and in a constant catabolic state that they're in, I feel like that's extremely important. And again, I'm speaking out of people who I've had the opportunity to speak with over the past couple of years. That, I'm just relaying information that I sold. Yeah.
No, that's definitely good. Okay. I think, just considering all the factors, right? And just putting yourself in that athlete's shoes. So you coming from an athletic background, it's a lot, you can kind of put yourself in those shoes of like, hey, like, how does it feel to go play a game? Like, for example, like a 90-minute soccer game, and then, you're going to have to hit the weight room coming up soon. And like you said, hit that 80 to 90%. Like, it's just probably not going to happen. And if it does, it's probably not going to be at a high quality, So keeping those kind of factors in mind when programming, it's just so multifactorial that you can't just look at one piece and be like, all right, this is what we're doing, independently of what's going on the field,
No question, I agree.
So moving forward a little bit into some leadership, continuing education kind of stuff, what is your approach in kind of managing people, and how does that look kind of from intern all the way on up to like an assistant?
I like to call it working with versus managing.
Okay.
I think communication's key. I think, respect, having high standards, making sure everyone's on the same page. We all have a job. I think that anyone in the weight room, whether it be an athlete, an intern, my boss, whoever it is, I think if we're all doing things with the same culture in mind, and we all have these different responsibilities. But I think that the way we interact with one another, it doesn't really change just the responsibilities do. Ultimately, I have to answer for certain people, and there are people that have to answer for me. So there is a hierarchy. But I think that, if you treat people with respect and you have these high standards, and you just, you keep it objective, like, hey, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, there's nothing emotional, or, it's just simply we need to do our jobs. Right? And, it's the old Bill Belichick, do your job. And, I think that's something that we try to instill in what we try to accomplish in our weight room.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. Is there, in terms of like education, how does that look? Like, you talked kind of about the curriculum that you have some for the GAs. Is there a different curriculum kind of for interns?
So Kelly Murphy, who is our assistant director, she runs the intern program, so intern education program. We'll cross-correlate that. So I run the graduate assistant education program, which is more hands-on, in a sense. Like, we'll reach out and we'll do Skype talks, and we'll have knowledge-based content that we go over, but a lot of it is, right now they have cheer and they have dance. So we're trying to identify what's the end goal, what's the, what do we need to do, what are we trying to accomplish, what do these individual athletes need to do, like what do they need to be able to do.
Yeah.
So so we just kind of, I'm teaching them like a systematic approach toward, if it was cheer and dance, if it was football, whatever it is, identifying these different needs of the sport, looking at the variables you can control, looking at the variables you can't control, and then creating the plan, based off this. So those are some of the things that, again, a little bit more experience based, and then we go back and we talk about it. So there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of looking at variables versus just going over content. With the interns, it's more content based. And then, I want you to write down questions you have, and then when you come in and we talk at the end of the week and you're like, well, you told us this in the book, and then, why did you do this?
Yeah.
And then explaining to them, well, here's the 6 reasons why we did this.
Yeah.
Again, it's not necessarily best practice. It's best case for the situation you're in and the variables that you have around you.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's kind of cool how you guys kind of split it up and have different people so in charge of different programs, right? So in order to specify more, right? Because I know a lot of people with their means, they're only able to do like one kind of program, like GAs. Maybe they kind of separate a little bit more, but as well as from interns, but having that distinction of like, all right, we're going to go into specific content and make sure that like certain groups aren't getting overloaded with information they're not able to like process and take from, right? And it also makes sure that you're covering the bases with some of those younger coaches,
Yeah, I mean, just like, we have different developmental groups for freshmen versus seniors in our weight room with our student athletes. We definitely shouldn't, in my opinion, you shouldn't be sitting in the same room talking about the same stuff with someone who is a graduate assistant versus someone who is their first semester as an intern.
Yeah.
So, I think that's something that we do. And even our graduate assistants, they spend a lot of time with all the coaches, because they work with everyone. Yeah. And, so they get a pretty well-rounded experience.
Yeah.
That being said, it is an experience where we ask them, we're like, hey, you're in charge of your own education and your own experience to an extent. You got to ask questions. You got to dive into this stuff.
Yeah.
It can't just be you do what we say and believe that you're doing the right thing because we're saying to do it. Like, we want you to respectfully question things, and we want to have these discussions because that's what's ultimately going to lead. I've learned more from conversations with some of my colleagues and other people, or it's turned me on to certain things more than just sitting in front of a presentation reading a PowerPoint. So, that interaction and that critical thinking, I think, is extremely important. It's something that, as an intern, and we're asking you to memorize, particular information, it becomes a lot differently when we want you to, strength conditioning. We talked about variables, and we talked about, you said earlier, how it's always about, depends on the variables, depends on the circumstances. We have to be critical thinkers. So that's something that we definitely want to push forward with our graduate assistants is, you got to think.
I love that. Yeah, creating an independent thought process. I love it because that's what they're going to take from that the most, right? Because, different programs have different structures, so being able to have an independent thought process is like going to benefit them across the board no matter where they go. So that's huge. And then kind of moving forward with that into professional development, for younger coaches specifically, right? What kind of general format tips for, resume or cover letter might you have for some of those younger coaches?
Being organized, easy to read, correct grammar, making sure you're addressing the correct person. Nothing too out of the ordinary or special with the resume. Cover letter, I definitely want to, tell me about who you are and your why versus what you've done. I'm going to be able to see that on your resume. Everyone has different people in mind of who they would hire and why they would hire them. But, our culture is extremely important, and our passion and our why is extremely important in who we look at to hire, whether it be an intern, a GA, or a full-time assistant. So, those are important things to me as far as, formats, resume, cover letter.
I love it. Okay. And so what are some resources that have had a big impact on you and your professional development, whether it's a book or a podcast or a conversation or really anything?
I think everyone needs a basic understanding of the general physiological principles. Stress, adaptation, some of my best resources have honestly been other strength coaches, even sport coaches and even support staff members. And I think it's important to share experiences, have analytical conversations. And I know I'm not specifically answering your question, but I definitely think it's important to kind of mention this.
Yeah.
There are the Mike Boyle literature. There's the Joe Ken literature. There's all these different literatures from these different individuals who I think are extremely important. I think it's extremely important to read the CSCS Essentials because as basic as it is, most of the things that are out there now you can trace back to general physiological principles.
Yeah.
And without general physiological principles, that's kind of like your base. That's your foundation. That's your that's your cardiac output moving into some of your more intense conditioning sessions, right? So I think that's extremely important. And then some of the best resources have just been some of these in-depth conversations where you have to go into them having the right mindset though.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to let your guard down. You have to be willing to be wrong. You have to really be willing to learn things, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm having a conversation with someone, it's not just about seeking affirmation. I don't want to just talk to people who believe what I believe, and we're going to go back and forth talking about the same thing, and just making both ourselves feel better. I encourage people to read things that you don't necessarily agree with, and then try to understand, why this person or this individual or the author believes what they do. If it's someone athletic performance based, well, everyone is trying to improve athletic performance. And if I'm working with soccer and there's someone else that's working with soccer at a very high level, or someone that's working at soccer in general, who's educated, who is saying certain things I don't agree with, why are they saying what they're saying, right? Again, I know I got a little bit off track there, but
no, that's good.
Some of these things and having these different conversations, and I've had a lot of people who, in the past 2 months, I've got a whole folder full of literature of people I've been speaking with that, based off a conversation, I was like, hey, could you send, even people, some of my opponents we've had over the past 4 weeks, we'll be sitting there talking shop before a game, or they'll come in and get a list in. I'm like, hey, good luck the rest of the season. Will you send me so-and-so on what you were talking about? Yeah. So it's,
that's huge.
And then you're going to get, some more specific things that are more relevant. But, it's just like what I believe in as far as a career in general. You want to start general and work specific. And that's even important with your career. I'm talking about some of this specific high-level soccer stuff now. Well, without the foundations of things that I did early on, I wouldn't be at the point I'm at now to be talking about these things.
No, I agree. That's huge, right? Creating a base and creating a stable base at that. So I like that. And then moving forward into this last segment here, a few rapid fire questions, right? So what are some, if you have any quotes that you live by?
I don't know if they're necessarily quotes. Two things that I constantly are in the back of my head are just remember what you're doing. Like, remember your purpose, your motivation, why you're doing what you're doing. And then just be a forever learner. Like, be open, like I was talking about just a minute ago. Be open to being wrong. Think of things, I tell myself a lot, like, think of this as from a third person perspective and just look at things objectively. And are you a little bit biased because you've done things for so long, or you've seen things success a certain way? You just have to be open to, if you know everything, there's nowhere to learn, right? There's nowhere to go as far as learning. So
I love it. Okay. What is the best advice that you've ever been given?
The best advice? I'd say probably live in the present. And I know that's very general versus specific. But, with everything that's going on in our lives and, all the different, I wouldn't call them distractions, but all the different things that we have going on in our lives these days, you're always looking back to learn from something, or you're always looking forward and trying to be proactive about something. Like just living in the moment. So that's something that, again, kind of off topic there, off tangent, but, it's hard sometimes just to put down your phone and look at what's going on without thinking about these things.
I love it. Okay. So in contrast to that, what's the worst advice you've ever been given?
I've had people tell me before, like, especially with our populations, sometimes you just got to lower your expectations. I refuse to believe that. I think maybe it's more of like an EQ thing. Sometimes you got to meet people in the middle, and with some of your athletes, and you always have those 1%, 2% of athletes who are just your All-American that does things the right way. Works hard. I mean, he's talented, or she's talented, but they do things right too, and they kind of spoil it for some of the others that are just good people that work hard that just don't have the same motives of drive. I think I could probably continue to work on my EQ a little bit, but I'm not going to necessarily settle just because I'm going to try to find a way to get that out of these particular athletes versus lowering my standards so that I'm not you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then for the listeners, will you just define EQ?
Emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just the ability to conversate, get along, and what I've found more and more, especially being a strength coach, is we're constantly talking about how we have to make athletes uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, when you make athletes uncomfortable, they're not always going to be happy with you, and there's going to be some uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
If you're very agreeable, and if that athlete's motivated and you can be agreeable with them all the time, that's great. But I had a couple, when I was in Chattanooga, my boss there, there were certain times he would just be like, "We're too comfortable. I have to make things uncomfortable."
Yeah.
And he would do some things, and I would be like, I'd be like, "What is going on?" But it was just like, it was like things are just too comfortable right now. And if you're comfortable, you're not growing, and you always want to be a little uncomfortable. So, I guess that emotional intelligence, and there's a lot of strength coaches that are really good at doing both.
Yeah.
I still, when I go to make athletes uncomfortable, sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I can work on that.
Yeah. Okay. So last question here. What projects are you currently working on, and how can people kind of reach out to you and follow your journey?
I'm not working on any specific projects. And I know this is kind of cliche and corny, but I'm just trying to improve myself daily. Like I was saying earlier, I'm continuing to try to find ways to be a better strength coach where I'm at with the resources I have. I've been here a year and a half. I'm still learning a lot. At the previous schools I've been at, I've been spread out a little bit more. Here, I get to spend a little bit more time with less teams. So I'm trying to figure out how to maximize the time that I have. In the energy I have to better serve these teams and these athletes, and just trying to be the best strength coach I can be at Virginia Tech. To be honest, there's always little things you're working on here and there, and I'm always working on the technology piece and trying to figure out how I can best look at the data over acutely and over extended periods of time to make better educated guesses. But really just trying to get better.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time. I think this was huge. A lot of specific things, but then a lot of also like broader concepts that people kind of can apply to their life and their coaching experience. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to connecting again soon.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon, Coach.